Bruce, this is Condor 1.
Those of you familiar with the channel will know that despite me uploading almost exclusively Resident Evil 4 related content, I haven't shown much excitement over the upcoming remake. The reason for my hesitant approach to it since the initial announcement and even after the first cinematic trailer boils down to a lack of faith in Capcom. This lack of faith stems from Capcom's well-documented history of poor decisions. Be it the downgrade that Street Fighter V was compared to 4, the schizophrenic disaster called Resident Evil 6, the utter disappointment of the Resident Evil 3 remake, or whatever the hell Umbrella Corps was supposed to be, Capcom have demonstrated that they are consistently incapable of replicating their evidently rare strokes of genius. Resident Evil 4 was certainly one of these genius moments. A game that was nothing short of lightning in a bottle that ended up redefining a genre and pioneering a whole new style of gameplay. It's no secret that Resident Evil 4 is one of my favourite games of all time, and ranks among my top 3 Resident Evil games as well. It's a game I've played religiously since its release and, unsurprisingly, have a great deal of love for. So when the remake was announced, I became extremely nervous indeed. The only remake that ended up being better than the original in every way was Resident Evil Remake. This was a game that not only remade the very first game with the latest graphical and mechanical upgrades, but also added brand new content. This remake was bigger and better than the original with new enemies and new lore that did not make it feel bloated, but instead made it feel more fleshed out while also being creepier and scarier. No one can deny their utter terror when encountering a Crimson Head for the first time in an area they previously believed to be safe. Nor can anyone say that Lisa Trevor is not the most tragic character in the entire franchise. A monster that we're made to feel deep sympathy for.
Be a good girl and stay dead this time.
It's for these reasons and more that Resident Evil Remake is regarded by many as the definitive Resident Evil experience. Therefore, at least for me, a Resident Evil 4 remake would have to follow in these footsteps. It wouldn't have to be just as good as the original, a titanic demand in of itself, but it would have to be better. Setting the bar so high just seems unfair on Capcom given their record. Resident Evil 2 Remake was very good but fell short of the original due to cut content. Resident Evil 3 Remake was more like a flashback sequence, given how much content had been cut and how Nemesis had been transformed from a terrifying monstrosity into a minor inconvenience with piano keys for teeth. Not to mention that Capcom's understanding of a great multiplayer experience had also morphed from the genius of Outbreak into the stupidity of Umbrella Corps. To fairly ask the remake to be better than the original would require an understanding not only of what makes RE4 so amazing to begin with, but more importantly, how it could be improved upon. Resident Evil 4 was largely an upgrade in of itself. Leon was more skilled and capable than his younger self had been in Raccoon City. The Ganados were far more dangerous and coordinated than zombies of previous games. The combat system was more flexible and responsive than the previous system, and the environment was different as well. However, despite Capcom's best efforts to strike a balance between this new, action-heavy gameplay and the classic survival horror, the action carried more weight. Resident Evil 4 isn't without its scary moments or creepy areas, but the player is granted so many attack options that no creature is too terrifying to deal with. There's also hardly any backtracking in the game either. And as for the puzzle element, well, I'm certain that a corgi could overcome Resident Evil 4's puzzles without expending too much brain power. So, Resident Evil 4 Remake needs to grant Leon greater movement and combat options that just couldn't be implemented in 2005 due to hardware limitations. It also needs to drastically improve the intelligence and attack options of the enemies, as Resident Evil 4 VR demonstrated just how dated their AI has become. As the original Resident Evil Remake has proven, new enemies, areas and additions to the in-game lore would also be welcome ways to enrich the story and provide a brand new experience for veterans such as myself. The remake should feel like it's the same team that worked on Resident Evil 4's original release, using the technology available in 2022. I made it my personal policy to avoid as much of the hype, news, rumours and leaks as possible. I wanted to judge the game based on what Capcom would show in terms of trailers and demos. Not to mention the fact that I'm not an idiot, and I'm aware that most of the leaks on YouTube are the works of unimaginative clickbait grifters who don't deserve a fraction of the views they get. Nowadays, anyone can make a prediction and post it on Reddit or Twitter and have people believe it's a real leak. What all this means is that my first look at the Resident Evil 4 remake was the first official trailer, and while this wasn't enough to make me excited for the game, it was enough to increase my interest and hopes. The redesigns of familiar characters and areas certainly looked beautiful and new, while also holding a nostalgic quality to them. Unfortunately, Capcom has fooled us all before with making things look pretty, while the game itself ends up being a disappointment. I chose to wait patiently for gameplay before passing any definitive judgment on the upcoming game. A couple weeks ago, the first gameplay trailer was released as part of the Resident Evil showcase, providing us with a good look at how the game would be like to play. Was this trailer finally enough to get me excited for the Resident Evil 4 remake? Yes. There was a lot to see in this new trailer, so I had to watch it over a few times to pick out every interesting detail. The first thing that stood out was how faithful the design of the environment was, not only in terms of the general layout, but also item placement. I don't expect every single item location to be identical to the original, but it's nice knowing that I already know where to find ammo, herbs, or at least something of use. The announcement trailer gave us a glimpse of some of the updated character designs, but this trailer has given us a far better look at most of the key characters. Leon, Ashley, Ada, Mendez, Salazar and Sadler all look fantastic, with the villains looking far scarier than their original designs. The Granados themselves look utterly deranged and terrifying, with our good friend Dr. Salvador looking even scarier than before. The intimidating appearance of El Gigante and the Verdugos makes me excited to see the redesigns for other enemies in the game, such as Agarrador, U3, and Regenerators. However, I'm not in love with absolutely everything here. While they've managed to make Ashley far more attractive than she originally was, for reasons best known to themselves, they've made Lewis look like a drug addict. I'm sure there are people out there who will find this redesign to be great and perhaps more attractive than the original, but I'm not one of those people. There's also been a lot of talk about Ada's voice, and I must agree with much of it. It's only one line in the trailer and it might sound completely different in the finished game, but the delivery of the line is terrible.
You can stop right there.
Ada's voice has been recast yet again because Capcom prefer to save money and not use voice actors who are unionized. It's depressing, but not surprising. From what we've seen, there's been a sincere effort to keep the remake as close to the original as possible. So many scenes from the trailer were instantly recognizable, as were the locations.
Holy shit. Your soul.
Ashley Graham, are you in here?
Just let me go.
Listen. I'm hearing the president's orders and
What is that?
You can stop right there.
Ada. I will show her back. Ashley, run! The entire world shall overflow with his grace.
What's happening to me?
Your body. Now that he has chosen death.
Though we've only seen the village for most of the trailer with only the odd glimpse of the castle, I'm hoping this effort is carried throughout the game with very little cut content. As for the gameplay itself, I'm happy to see that they've taken the correct approach for updating the game with modern mechanics. The Granados appear to be more coordinated with new attacks, which should make them more dangerous than they were before. Leon's own movement has been given much more variety, with the original slow walk and run options being retained, but now with an additional crouch mechanic. The movement seems very reminiscent of The Last of Us, and considering that's also a game I absolutely adored, I agree with this choice. What was also imperative for this game was for Capcom to ditch the seemingly immortal zombies that would absorb bullets with all the flinching chance of a concrete pillar. Seeing Leon stun Ganados with gunshots and kick them to send them crashing to the floor is exactly what we needed to see. Speaking of attack options, it's also clear that the environmental options have not only been brought back, but also improved. I can't deny that I giggled when I saw Leon attack the Ganado with roast beef.
Kill me for the repairs later.
Of course, one of the key elements of combat in the original was the knife. The remake has honoured that standard by making the knife play far more versatile, with parries, ground kills and counters now being added. The knife does appear to have durability, which is something I was not a fan of in the RE2 remake, but it can at least be repaired and upgraded by the merchant. Everyone is of course talking about Leon blocking the chainsaw with his knife and how utterly absurd that is. I agree, as anyone with any knowledge of chainsaws and physics will tell you that this is an impossible feat. However, this is a series where characters frequently survive injuries that would kill a regular person, while also performing feats no normal human could. If we can accept that Chris Redfield could punch and move a volcanic boulder, then we can accept that Leon can block a chainsaw with his knife. The upgrades to the knife play along with a potential stealth element to the game does lead me to one prediction. Knife play will be worth getting particularly good at, as it will probably be at the very centre of the redesigns around the encounters with Krauser. I don't think we'll be getting a QTE heavy cutscene this time, but instead we'll be forced to take matters into our own hands. This could make Krauser one of the most fun, yet challenging bosses in the remake. In conclusion, the remake for Resident Evil 4 appears to have been taken in the direction that I had hoped for. There is an effort to keep the game as close to the original as possible. The movement and combat system have both been vastly upgraded, with the enemies receiving similar changes. The redesigns overall are beautiful, and it sounds like authentic Castellano is being spoken this time too. The horror element has also been brought back, presumably to achieve a greater balance between the action and horror, which the original game failed to do. Also, if the scene with Ashley is anything to go by, then there's going to be brand new sequences and areas to the game as well. Capcom have done something very impressive here. They've got me excited for this remake. I hope that the extra modes are also included in the remake. Separate Ways is in desperate need of narrative improvements to make it blend better with the original campaign. Hopefully, if Separate Ways is in the remake, we finally get updated cutscenes. It goes without saying, but I hope that unlike the Resident Evil 3 remake, The Mercenaries also gets remade in a similar fashion. Keep it as close to the original as possible, while upgrading it with modern mechanics and more content. Of course, the cynic in me knows not to get too excited. This is Capcom after all, and they always find ways to disappoint us these days. But I have my fingers crossed that this remake will emulate the same genius that birthed the original game. Only time will tell, and I look forward to playing the demo when it's released. And hey, if the remake ends up being a massive disappointment, then we'll always have the original to return to. Anyway, I've waffled on for far too long. Now it's your turn. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on the remake, and let's get the discussion started.